somebody listening right now needs to hear this. I know that I do right now need to hear this for myself. But even if nobody, let me rephrase it. Even if you are the only person telling yourself to keep carrying on and to keep trying and to keep striving and pushing toward your goal, that's enough. Listen to yourself and believe yourself. It's my experience that sometimes in life, nobody is going to tell you that you can do it. Some people will try to very nicely let you down, tell you to go back to safer waters or retreat behind the walls for your own good. And that can be really challenging to hear that and think they were supposed to be my encouragement when I felt like I couldn't do it anymore. You might have to be that for yourself. And so if you're listening right now and you need to hear that, then encourage yourself. I also am happy to let you know if this message is feeling extremely personal to you and you need to hear me say it to you, keep going, keep pushing, keep pressing. The only way you lose is if you quit or if you die before you succeeded. And you're not dead yet. So anyways, on that really positive and chipper note, I wanted to let you know I'm bringing a podcast recording out of the deep vaults. I recorded this all the way back before Thanksgiving of 2022. So some of this stuff is going to be really far out of chronological order. I mention, again, the wonderful and talented Robin and Michael J. Sullivan. And this also is an interview with a man who was briefly one of my pastors at church. So it's been a long time, and I do talk about that toward the end. I think he's awfully gracious in not necessarily trying to go evangelical on me at the end of the podcast. But if you are a non-religious or non-spiritual listener, there is a ton as a reader or a writer to be gathered from the Enneagrams and those assessment tools to understand yourself better. Certainly, you will hear Tyler talk about how people in the church are kind of split on whether this is a good thing or if it's really evil, kind of like Harry Potter. I don't know. Anyways, hope you enjoy this interview with Tyler Zock.
Now, if you've ever watched an author read in public and felt bored, TRBM is the antidote. TRBM is for writers what time-lapse was for painters, guitar solos and spotlight were for bands, and what chainsaws and ice blocks were for sculptors. But what does TRBM stand for? The robust, bold monster? Tutus reinvent ballet moves? Or Tony Romo battled mascots? You decide.
Yeah. So the Enneagram is a motivation-based personality framework, just oriented around 9 types, so 9 archetypes. And where other personality types describe outward behavior, the Enneagram is helpful to understand why you do what you do. And it's also unique in that it's a map. It charts a growth path for you, so it doesn't just tell you what you're good at, what your strengths are, but shows you where you can grow. And so that's one of the reasons why people love it so much.
Okay. What made you fall for it specifically? I mean, you came from a background where there was a lot of focus on personality tests and types as well. I think that was kind of woven into both core, the church I came from, and then Coram Deo, where you came from. And then we sort of, ran into each other many, many times along the way. But both of those churches really cared a lot about personality types. So is that where you fell in love with it, or did you fall in love with the churches because of those? Does that make sense what I'm asking?
Yeah, I've always loved personality assessments. I know some people don't, but I've always loved it because I love learning about myself. I love the self-actualization piece of understanding how I'm wired, just because I want to understand personal calling and where I'm going and what I'm supposed to be doing. Also, I want to grow. I want to be transformed. And if there's a tool that can help me understand myself better, I'm going to use it. So, I've used Myers-Briggs and other tools, but the Enneagram has been the best tool because it gets under the hood in a way that other tools have not been able to do. I mean, it looks at your core motivation, your core sin, right? You're helping you to understand why you do what you do is so helpful. And I think one of the reasons why I love it is because it can help you to understand how to encourage other people, how to not just challenge them, but how to encourage them and how to help them to see gifts that they didn't even realize they had, and to call out greatness in them, call out the gold in them. And the Enneagram's been just fabulous for that.
So one thing I'm curious about, and we'll tie this all into marketing. This is a book marketing mindset show, I should say. So we'll tie it into mindset a little bit. But I'm kind of curious. My sense about a lot of personality tests and things of that nature is that they almost appeal more to people who lean on logic and rational thought processes, and they're not as appealing to the highly emotional or emotive kind of people. Do you experience that, or what's your experience there?
No, I would say the Enneagram, I've experienced the opposite. I think the more logical people, the more rationally minded people are a little more skeptical of the Enneagram. And from what I found is a lot of the more logical, rational kinds of people also have really good boundaries and want privacy. And, and so the Enneagram gets, kind of reads your mail and it can be a little uncomfortable. Whereas like the type 9s on the Enneagram, that go with the flow. They love understanding all perspectives. They're very understanding. They're non-judgmental. Like they love the Enneagram because it's like, oh, I get to understand everyone's perspective, and I can help me bring peace and unity by bringing people together. So 9s typically love it. The 4s, which typically are the most feely type people, the artists, the creatives, they also love the Enneagram because they typically are okay with darker emotions and getting under the hood, and a lot of them are therapists and counselors as well. And they just love the Enneagram because it goes to a level of depth that other tools haven't been able to get to.
Gotcha.
So that's just my experience.
Step back real quick, because you started using numbers, and for people listening who don't necessarily know the numbers, go ahead and list them off just so that people can reference that part of the conversation. 1 through 9, it sounds like, right?
Yeah, there's 9 archetypes, and you could think of them as like the primary colors on a color wheel. And then as you blend certain colors together, like the paint swatch at Home Depot, you start getting different shades and hues. And that's sort of how the Enneagram theory goes, is we don't believe that there's just 9 types, but it's the best guess. It's a good system for now. There's 9 archetypes that are categorized, but you can sort of, blend them together like colors. But typically, there's you fall into one type and you're always that type. You never move to a different type. And so there's the 1, they're the improver or perfectionist. There's the 2, which are the helpers or befrienders. There's the 3s, and I would identify with the 3, which is an achiever, a very image conscious type that likes productivity and efficiency and getting things done. Then there's the 4, which are the individualists. They want to be unique and special. And then you get the 5s, which are the observers or investigators. They tend to be the most rationally minded type. And then you have the 6, which are the loyal skeptics or the loyalists. Very loyal to causes, very loyal to people, but also very skeptical and slow to gain trust. 7s are the enthusiasts. Oftentimes, they're the most like joy-filled people, excited about a lot of things, love new adventures. And then you got the 8s, which are the challengers, or what I like to call them the protectors. Very powerful people like MLK types. And then you have the 9, which are the peacemakers or mediators. Very go with the flow and love to see things from all sides and bring people together and mediate conflicts and create harmony. So that's just a quick, off the top of my head, rundown of all 9 types. Great.
So you mentioned how it's kind of a spectrum, and thinking of it like the color wheel. The one way I'm wondering if it's a little bit different is you could be like a combination of 1 and 9, right? But that wouldn't make you like closer to a 4.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
Yeah,
you're right. That would make you a 4. There's similarities between the numbers. Mm-hmm. We're all human. We're all very there's a lot of similarities and overlap, but there's some distinct differences between them that would make you a 1 or a 9. So, ones have this desire to be right, to desire to do things right, and desire to be perfect, and have a really hard time with imperfection. So it's fun putting this through the lens of writing, because, for example, type 1 is going to have a really hard time of getting a book to the shelf or getting a book published, because they're going to feel like it's not perfect enough. There's going to be too many flaws. It's just not going to be perfect enough, and they're going to have a really, really hard time hitting publish.
Okay.
Whereas other types would be like, 7s would be like, oh, I just got to get it out the door. I just got, it doesn't really matter. Like I just need to get it out there. And so there's the different personality types will show you how you approach writing.
Okay. Now, let me ask you a strange question. It goes back to, well, not necessarily a strange question. I asked you before, like, if emotional people are or less inclined to it, or if rational people are more inclined to it. Is there a type on the Enneagram that is most likely to dislike the process? Like somebody who's like, I don't care. I just don't want to know. I like, get it out of here.
Yeah. Like I said, I think the 5s, the observers or investigators, typically are the most skeptical of it, just because by nature they are very respect privacy and want privacy, and don't like people reading their mail.
Gotcha.
But the creator of the Ennea types actually was a 5, and so he was a brilliant psychologist that could put systems of thought together really, really sharply and succinctly. And but yeah, in my experience, 5s would have the hardest time, just because you start describing the type and you start describing, hey, 5s sometimes can be stingy with their resources, with their emotions. They need to be more generous and take what's the rich, creative world that's inside their head, and they need to be more generous in sharing it and getting it out there, rather than being so private. And so you start talking about these things, and it can make you uncomfortable. That's why one of the reasons why 5s have a hard time sometimes.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm trying to factor in for myself, figuring out why it is that typically these kind of tests are not palatable to me. And I don't think I'm a 5. Like, listening to what you're talking about that experience, it's interesting. I wonder, I don't like being boxed, I think, is the biggest thing. I don't like being put in a box. I feel like, depending on the circumstances, I can be so many different things. If I'm with my wife's family, I appear to be very introverted, almost to the point of like social awkwardness. People who listen to the podcast have heard me talk about these stories, so I'm not going to rehash too much of it. But I just clam up really hardcore around her family. But if I'm around my family, I'm kind of the joker, life of the party. Close friends, I can be really sincere, daring. I'm mischievous and pretty sneaky and somewhat deceptive. And so I have like a lot of different forms depending on where I fit in. And like every time I've run into tests, I can take the Myers-Briggs and know that it thinks I'm an INFJ. But like, to me, I don't see that I'm always that way. I think I have a lot of extroversion and a lot of introversion. And, I could go on like this forever. These tests make me uncomfortable by nature.
That's okay. I think not everyone should take the tests, and it's a matter of your conscience of whether or not you want to dig in. And as an Enneagram coach, I don't push it on other people, and so it's not for everyone. But it's different from astrology, and it's a different from numerology and some of those things where they say, hey, based on your birth date, this is who you are,
right?
Or based on your name, the letters of your name, this is who you are. So the Enneagram type is you self-verify. So you read through the best description possible of the 9 types, and it deals with probabilities, not absolutes. So it's saying, if you are a 3, here are some probabilities that are very common of people in this sort of color and this sort of number range. And so there are things that you need to be on guard for, be looking out for. It may not be true. It's not absolutely true of you, but there's some high probabilities. And so do that work of figuring out which one you lean towards, and then see if there's any of those things that you feel like you need to work on. And that way it can be a really helpful map. And so where it gets unhealthy is where you start boxing yourself in, saying this is my identity because the Enneagram's telling me what my identity is, or like, hey, you're a 4, and start calling other people numbers and boxing them in. That's where it goes against Enneagram ethics, is what I say.
Okay. So in the situation of writers, you've written books. You're still in the process of writing more books. There's a series, and I want to get to talking more about those books very specifically here in a minute. But you had mentioned earlier there are types or people who are going to have a harder time getting books on the shelf. How do you see this being a useful tool for somebody if they want to dive into their own mindset and see, hey, I wrote this book, I published it, and now I've got to get it in front of readers. What are the ways that I can use an Enneagram to help me have a better mindset toward marketing?
That's such a great question. It just takes learning. Like, starting with the Enneagram primer book, like The Road Back to You, is a really helpful book for both religious and non-religious audiences. I have a self-typing guide on my website that you can actually see 30 bullet points for every type. So kind of a quick overview of all the types. And if you just see that one page of characteristics, you can start to understand some of the pros and cons, or that's not the right word. Some of the strengths and challenges, that you might have to marketing your book or publishing your book. And it's very, very helpful, and also can safeguard you in certain ways as well. Like my mom's a 5, observer investigator, like I shared before. They sometimes have a harder time with the Enneagram. And for her, as a 5, 5s love researching. They love just researching all kinds of topics. They love knowledge. They want to be competent, and they can be fantastic writers because they can be very creative, rich inner world. But for her, she never feels like she's done enough research to actually move ahead. And so she's an artist. And so she's done all kinds of paintings, beautiful paintings, but she feels like she has to do more research on how to do an Etsy shop and how to do all these things. And she feels like not competent enough to be able to like move forward. And so I'm there to encourage her to be like, just hit go, just do it. Yeah. Because you're incredibly competent. And so, done is better than perfect. And so let's move forward. Right. And, we could spend, an hour just talking about, each type. But for me as a 3, I can tend to take shortcuts. So I love productivity. I love efficiency. I want to look good. I want to make an impression. And so it can hurt me when I'm too image conscious. When I'm not authentic in my books, sharing the real me, sharing stories that might make me look bad, of being my authentic self versus being a polished self, and that's really helpful in terms of the show of marketing, is you can be slick, you can say all the things that people want to hear, or you can be your true authentic self, and for me, I got to always write with that mindset of I got to write through my authentic self. I got to be who I am, and not the polished version of who I am. And because I care a lot about efficiency, I could speed up the writing process too much. I could take shortcuts, not cite all my, my sources. I could sort of take shortcuts, and that's why I have an editor who is a type 1. Who's a perfectionist and doesn't let me get away with anything, it just double checks every single source that I put down. And hey, have you cited this source? And, it cares a lot about integrity. And so she can safeguard me when I'm getting off, heading off in the wrong direction or taking shortcuts. Yeah. So,
do you feel like you would ever choose not to work with somebody as an editor, or partner with somebody as maybe a beta reader of some kind based on their Enneagram and yours? Is there a case where the clash would be too unproductive?
No, I would say to not hire somebody or not, based on the Enneagram type would be going against my ethics. Right. Because I feel like anyone can be a good beta reader. Anyone could be good for a job, but I do think it helps you with, like, again, probabilities on like what their strengths are and what your needs are. So yeah.
Trying to remember, there was it was REM. I was hearing this story on another podcast I was listening to recently, and REM was kind of at an inflection point for the band. And so they decided to take time off of touring, was one of the things they did at a time when, like, not touring would destroy a band. And they were like, we're going to implode if we don't take this time off. And then they all decided to switch instruments. So, the guy who was playing the guitar switched to the mandolin, the guy who was playing the drums switched to the guitar, so on and so forth. And the next album they made was one of the best selling albums of all time.
Wow.
And yeah, so like this idea of switching out of your comfort zone sometimes will create amazing things. At the same time, I do notice that there are people that I'm naturally, and apologies for the dog in the background, but there are people that I naturally clash with, that it's a lot harder to work with. And in my own personal world, if I were going to count on putting bread on the table, there's some people I might not hire just because I know they don't fit real well with how I work. Do you run into that? And is that something that you can solve with the Enneagram, or is it something you can avoid? What are your thoughts there?
No, of course. The Enneagram is super helpful for that. And I use it with premarital counseling, just to do just that, figure out what the points of conflict might be, or to explore what they already are and kind of explain why there's conflict going on. I've been going to businesses, sort of my side hustle, doing coaching and helping teams understand each other more and where there might be conflict. And, especially with bosses, a boss's personality can make or break their leadership and influence. And so even helping bosses who are managing people understand their weaknesses and strengths and how it might be coming off is super helpful. So I was just going to ask you, what are, since you're not as familiar with the Enneagram, you can't cheat.
Yeah.
What are some of the types of people or the characteristics that you have a really hard time with?
Well, so in this we don't have enough of an audience who knows the circles that we traveled in, but you probably know a guy named Aaron. If you don't know his last name, that's fine. But he would be like, if you do know who I'm talking about, he would be a quick way to hack that. He's actually, oddly enough, or ironically enough, a business partner of mine. However, his personality and mine clash hard because we're both really alpha. That's how I would explain that. Is I want to have control of a group or a room. I don't think of it in that way when I'm just existing, but when somebody else comes in and threatens for kind of like that pivot point or the central role, I really struggle with that. And then you talked about fives. So there's something about somebody who does enough research, and that also is probably me. I'm a fairly heavy researcher generally. If somebody comes off as a know-it-all to me, that is a real quick, like, it'll shut me down pretty hard. So I want fluid conversation. And when somebody is really set on facts and knowing things and research, that's a huge challenge.
Yeah. So the fives tend to be know-it-alls when they're not healthy, because they fear being incompetent. And so they research, more than anyone, to become competent. That's the image they want to present themselves as. The fig leaves, they want to cover themselves with competence, and their biggest fear is looking dumb. But when they're unhealthy and they're working out of a place of insecurity, they're going to make other people feel dumb to make themselves feel smarter. And so they will come off as a know-it-all and can be very condescending. So that's just, a little bit more on the five. On the power dynamic side, eights tend to be the most in tune with power dynamics and who holds the power in the room, and tend to be very, the chief types that love to get momentum going, get things moving in a positive direction. They love obstacles because they're challenges to overcome. They don't get excited about conflict, but they're not afraid of conflict. Because conflict can be, there can be a lot of energy, an exchange of energy in conflict, and they don't want to live in a boring, slow, dull world. They want to live in an exciting world. And so they are more, going to be challenging other people, wrestling almost with people over different issues, and definitely will feel the power dynamics of somebody else coming into the room that wants to control the room or lead the room. And so that's what came to mind when you were talking about that. Yeah. I'm not sure if that resonates at all, or if any of those.
Especially when you were talking about being sensitive to the power dynamic, and then, that conflict thing. This past weekend, we had a late Thanksgiving with my side of the family, and my son is turning 9. And so we went to get him some fish for his new aquarium. And we get there, and the guy at the fish shop is like, well, how long have you had your tank? And my wife's like, we've only had it a couple of days. And he's like, you can't get fish. You've got to cycle the tank. We didn't know anything about cycling a tank. And we're talking with my son, and he's like really, really bummed about it. And so I'm like, as much as I really care about being a good steward of all living things, I think based on everything that I know, these fish are probably going to be okay. And if they aren't, I'll take the responsibility, and he won't have to spend any of his birthday money. So my wife is like, but like, we can't go ask to buy the fish. And I'm like, yeah, of course we can. I'll go ask the guy to buy fish. And if he says no, he'll never get our business again. Like that sense of conflict, no problem. I have no issue with conflict. So that definitely resonates with me. Where I think I'd like to try to move this conversation based on some of this is, it is clear to me that you could hear some of the things I was saying and sort of fit them into the Enneagram. Going back to that idea of how do we use this because you've sold a lot of books, for one. I mean, I want to give you an opportunity to brag about how many books you've sold. How do you use your knowledge of your own personality to get in front of an audience that's interested in buying your book, or how do you brand based on that?
Yeah, that's good. As much fun as I love talking about the Enneagram, it's good to head in this direction, because I'm, just like anyone in your audience listening, I am on my own journey of writing books and figuring out how to market them. Even right now, trying to figure out how to get my books published on Enneagram Spark and get them into libraries and Target, because they've been on Amazon only for the last couple of years. And so I'm probably right there with a lot of your audience right now. Yeah. So just to back up, back in 2020, I decided to give the next 5 years of my life to writing a book for every Enneagram type. And so there's 9 types, and they're all faith-based. I'm a pastor right now. I'm going to be making a transition here at the end of the year. But it's sort of a way to encourage people and also challenge them based on their core motivations, core weaknesses, core strengths, in a very specific way, which I love. And so I decided to give the next 5 years of writing books, and then I had to figure out how to do it. I never thought of myself as an author. I felt like my mom, she's the English teacher, and she's a great writer. She's published a book. My sister has a phenomenal writing skills. But actually, even though my sister is the more talented writer, it's taken her a lot longer to actually work on a book, and she hasn't published yet. And so she's still struggling with how to do that while working another full-time job, which I know a lot of your audience is in the same boat. So I decided to spend 5 years, and, the way you eat an elephant is one bite at a time. And so I decided, okay, if it's going to be a 40-day devotional, then I have to spend, 3 days writing one devotion. And then, eventually I'll get to 40 over the course of 4 months, just breaking it down and doing an hour of writing before work every single day. And doing that, just very bite-sized, small chunks. I was able to produce a devotional once every 6 months. So about 4 months to write it, and then a couple months to get through the editing process, and then do a book launch online on social media. And then, so I've published 6 books now, just came out the 6th one. And so I got 3 more to go. And that's kind of where I'm at in the process. And I decided to do a social media, or to create some social media accounts and get that going 6 months before my first book. And it was slow at first, but then it exponentially rose. And so now I have about 43,000 followers on Instagram. And but here's the deal is, this is just a warning to your audience too, is make sure that you have a good password, that your account's secure.
Oh no.
Because I just got hacked a month ago. And so it's been just a really rough process this past month, figuring out how to get it back. and it's been just so hard. But the good news is, literally like 30 minutes before I jumped on a talk with you, I got an email from them saying that they've disabled it by accident. But the reason I was able to get it back was because my sister, who works in the tech industry, had a friend who works for Facebook.
Wow.
And so I contacted her yesterday and she got me back within 24 hours. But most people aren't going to have the privilege of knowing an insider.
Well, I'm telling you, that's the secret sauce, though. It's not what you know, it's who you know.
But here's the problem, and this is going to be helpful for a lot of authors who have social media accounts. Is there's a lot more hackers out there, and so and there's a lot less employees at Facebook, and Facebook owns Instagram, and so the bots shut me down, and there's not enough human beings to actually review these cases that are getting shut down, these accounts. And so you just need to make sure the account is secure. Otherwise you might get shut down too. Jeez. And I was just like, am I going to lose 3 years worth of hard work to get my Instagram account up? But thankfully, I got that resolved here half an hour ago and can start, because it affected my book launch huge. I just launched my sixth book this past week, and I could see the numbers. They're not as good as normal. So just thankful to get that back up.
Okay. So a quick little just kind of tangent based on that. Are you collecting email addresses from your following on Instagram at all? How are you are you bringing them into your own world?
Yeah. So, in the first year, I was just putting out content, working on that a little bit on the weekends and trying to get 3 posts out a week. And then eventually grew that. And then probably about 2 years ago, I found out about lead magnets and what that meant, and created a free resource called Should Christians Use the Enneagram? Sometimes non-Christian people who aren't Christian don't understand that, but there's a lot of like more fundamentalist Christians that are like, no, can't use the Enneagram. It looks like a pentagram, and have a lot of problems with it in the sources and origin of the Enneagram. And so I put out a PDF resource to say, hey, should Christians use it? And my answer is absolutely. And so a lot of people, that topic drew a lot of people to give me their email, get the free resource. Okay. And so I gained about, 1,500 emails over the last 2 years from that lead magnet, and then just came out with a self-typing PDF. So again, that document I referenced before of 30 points on every type. It'll help you. You don't have to take a test. You can just use that as a way to self-type yourself. And that's been really popular. That's brought in about 1,000 emails just in the last 3 to 4 months.
That's great.
And so that's been one way I've been able to, get more people on my email list.
That is great. I was having a conversation with Michael and Robin Sullivan recently. They are 2 highly successful fiction. Well, Michael's the author, Robin is the marketer, but they have used Kickstarter to launch their books. And essentially, if you run a successful Kickstarter, you get all of the email addresses for anybody who pre-orders a book. So that's kind of a cool thing. I bet you could do really well with a Kickstarter method for your next 3 books. And
thanks for the recommendation. I need to try that.
Yeah. Well, we can talk more about it offline too, because I think it actually sounds like it would be a beautiful fit for what you're doing. And there are a number of just sort of momentum type of advantages to doing it that I'm learning about. You have to be the right person to do a Kickstarter, though. I'm running mine right now, and it is like I'm making about 50 cents an hour for all the effort I'm putting in.
Hey, I donated to you.
Yeah, I know you did.
I believe in what you're doing.
Thank you.
So, yeah. I love being able to help each other out, and that's huge, man. I love what you're doing, and not just trying to make money from these books, but you have a vision. For getting this marketing book into the hands of every college student, so they can be successful. That is going above and beyond just trying to make money from a book, and you're showing that you have purpose and you want to help people. It's not just a selfish thing. So I love it and was grateful to contribute to it.
Yeah, well, thank you. Yes, and I mean it is. I like that about Kickstarter is that it may have its own kind of perceptions, but in reality, anytime anybody puts money into a Kickstarter, they're guaranteed to get a product out of it. So it's not, kind of that idea where you're crowdsourcing without giving anything back. I think there's a place for that, but I really like that Kickstarter guarantees a product somewhere along the line. Somebody's getting something. So moving forward, you were talking about book launches. You're talking about having 43,000 followers on Instagram. I want to touch on something that I think you're pretty qualified to discuss. With 43,000 followers on Instagram, I imagine you have like licking your chops kind of about how much access you have to people. And then maybe your book sales aren't quite as good as you might think. What are some areas that you've run into where you thought, wow, social media didn't get me as far as I thought it would?
Yeah, you know what? An email list is actually more effective.
Yeah.
And thank goodness that when my accounts got shut down this past month, I actually did have 12,000 plus on my email list. And that makes me think, okay, how did I get 12,000? There's probably about 2,000 to 3,000 I've gotten on my own. But 10,000 actually came from one person. And so, you'll know, Jody, that writing and creating a platform as an author takes a lot of work. It's not easy,
No, it's the hardest part, I think.
Yeah, it's just sowing seeds, daily, and you eventually reap, but it's a long process. And I'm not sure if this has happened to you, but I feel like there's little breaks or big breaks that come along the way if you're patient and just put in that work. And I think marketing, networking with others in the marketing process is such a big win. It's building friends in the space that you're in. That's why social media is so good. Is I know somebody who's a brilliant writer, teacher, but they're sort of limited because they don't have they're not in a community. They're not in an online space where they're talking to people that are talking about them. And so getting on Instagram was really fun because I was able to follow all of these people that were big names and more popular than me, and just started to put out my own content, started to message, DM them, say, hey, what's going on? And just communicate. And then, I got a message one day saying, hey, love your social media. Would you repurpose your social media on my account? Because it's not doing very well. And in exchange, if you just send me your posts, for a year or so and just help me build up my following, I'll give you access to my 10,000 people so that you can, and I've been able to advertise to those 10,000 people for every book that I've done. And that has helped me, just that networking of talking to people. And I'll never forget the first podcast that I was on, the Enneacast, and talking about should Christians use the Enneagram, and just what a huge boost that was for me to be able to get in, in front of so many more listeners. And it all came down to just networking and making friends in the space that you're in. And that's been tremendously helpful. And so going back to your question, so the email list is actually, I think, more effective, but social media definitely leads you to or network with more people who can get you in front of more audiences.
Yeah. So this is my audience has kind of heard one of my stories about Twitter and how I used social media kind of like a mailing list to build up my podcast. So there was a point where I was frustrated by plateauing out, and I knew that I had access to more people. I knew people were interested in what I had to say because I've been interacting for quite a while with folks on Twitter and doing really well there. And I started doing math in my head and thinking, you know what? I put together a compelling form message and I can message all of the people who follow me one by one. And it was extremely labor intensive, but it grew the podcast in a huge way. So there's this amazing aspect to social media. People don't necessarily know what you're doing, though. And I think that's the challenge. Whereas with an email list, you put together one compelling thing one time, hit send, and you blast it out to the world. So it is interesting, the different functions that we have based on what platform we're on.
Yeah. And I've been against email lists up until recently, but I've heard really successful people saying, no, you got to build, that's the thing that's secure. Everything else, YouTube can shut you down. Your email list is, and if you provide content in your emails, like good, valuable content, they don't mind deleting emails every once in a while because they know that there's free content and value is going to be coming their way, as long as you're not just always just trying to sell stuff, but you're giving tips and you're adding value. Then they love being on your email list. So that was a hurdle that I had to sort of get over to doing this. Another hurdle just on social media was my face, like putting myself out there. I sort of have a vanity for vanity, and I don't like, you know, I don't, there's a lot of ego and a lot of people that want to get their face out there on social media and look good. And like, I just don't want to be one of those people.
Okay.
You know, when it comes to marketing, I just don't I don't want to be one of those salesmen type of people who love themselves, who love talking about themselves. And so for the last 3 years on social media, I've primarily just done content, but I've never actually like been on a video, like talked to my audience, because I've sort of been hiding behind my content. And so I'm trying to step out of my comfort zone more and talk more, even though there's a fear of rejection of like, oh, they love my content, but they're probably going to reject me, you know?
Interesting. Yeah.
And so I've been trying to get beyond that, because I know that's going to help, but people really want to interact with you as an author, and they want to have that chemistry and that, those meaningful interactions. Yeah. And I know that, but it's been hard for me to still want to put myself out there on video. And, do you get what I'm saying?
Very much. Yeah. I mean, yeah, very, very much. I think video especially is really tough. The podcast atmosphere feels a little bit better because you kind of start getting into a sense of feeling like it's a phone call and you forget that people will listen to it. So I've had an easier time there, but very much. I think the other part of me though is, and this is where, you know, since you and I probably spoke more in the past, my journey has kind of taken me away from being actively involved in the church. And one of the things that I've had a really hard time reconciling is a lot of the people that I knew in the church, like, really sit hard on humility. And I have a close friend who's a brilliant musician. Guarantee you know him. But he decided to step away from pursuing serious music because he was afraid it would become an idol to him. And like, he didn't want to have an idolatry problem. And it just bothered the crap out of me. I was like, you were given a gift like almost nobody else. His musical gifting is just off the charts, and he's not going to pursue it seriously because he's afraid of having an idol. And I'm like, hey, I'm pretty sure that's not the road you're supposed to take, but I can't tell him what to do, you know? And so I've seen the church ruin some good people. And unfortunately, that's probably part of the process of my own journey right now. And I say all of that to say, like, part of me wonders how much of that is wrapped up. Like, how much are you thinking about your faith when you make that choice to kind of be behind the scenes? Like, are you afraid of thinking too much of yourself, or are there other things going on?
That's a great question. You're right. It comes down to stewardship. If you have a gift, you need to steward it. You need to use it. You can't just bury your talents in the sand, to use that biblical parable. Yeah. And in the Enneagram, bringing that back in here. So there's, on one side, you got the more self-assured ego side, personality types. And then you have the more false humility or self-sabotaging types. And so you got to kind of know who you are. If you are more prone towards ego and like, I want to fill the space with more me, you know, I call it the me monster, me. Yeah. Then you have to step back and create space for other people to shine and to use their gifts, and less of you. But there's people like the type 4s, for example. And a lot of the artistic types fit into 4s. They are self-sabotaging. They will sabotage themselves before other people can shame them or reject them, and oftentimes lack confidence. And so for those types of personalities, you need to say, hey, no, we need your gift. You need to bring yourself, your full self, to the world and your gifts, because it's meaningful and it adds value. So that the Enneagram can be helpful there. But for me, so I've been combating that fear of looking vain, and so again, as you can hear as I'm talking, there's a filter, almost like an Instagram filter, like a filter of how I look. I don't want to look bad, you know, and that can be a weakness. And as long as I'm bringing my vulnerable self and my weaknesses and not bringing my polished self, then get on video. Like, it's okay. Talk with people. They want to hear from you. Yes. You know, like, people don't just want your content. They want you. And I got to keep reminding myself of that, and realizing that it is, even if I look bad, I can still do it. and get over that fear of rejection. Like, oh, if they finally get to know the real me, then they'll not want to read my books because they'll see that I'm flawed. They'll see that there's imperfections. It's not that impressive. And so then I don't know if I want to read his books anymore. So I gotta get over that fear of rejection. Yeah.
There's something really core to my own feeling just hearing you talk, because I'm thinking about the ego that lives inside of me is afraid of all the things that you said, but I also have such a big ego, or what appears to be an ego or something, that I kind of figure that the numbers are in my favor. Like there's going to be a lot of people who hate what I have to say and don't enjoy my message. But I think of my message as being so compelling that there's just bound to be, a million people out there who are ready to hear what I have to say.
So a little more self-assurance there. Like, I think so. I believe in what I have to say. And, and that can be really good. Yeah. That self-assurance can be really great confidence.
It can, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it can. I think it can go both ways. And I've mostly been fortunate to have, my wife is a really good check on me. And she's also the eternal skeptic, which is great for a person like me to have a skeptic who's always like, you want to think about that again, maybe. I'd be like, no, $7,000. Let's buy whatever this is. And she's like, wait.
Yes. Sounds like you have a great wife.
Yeah,
you could have married somebody that just, goes along to get along and just, whatever you want, honey. But it sounds like you married married somebody who's good for you to put the brakes on when you need it.
Very much. Okay, so talk to me about your books. How can people, if they've listened to this and they're thinking they didn't even touch the surface of how they can use the Enneagram for marketing, mindset, kind of success in our mission of getting our books out into the world, how do they interact with you? Where's the best place to meet you? All the good details.
Yeah. So my website's gospelforenneagram.com. That's gospel, FOR, enneagram.com. My socials just came back online, or they're going to be coming back online. This is great. So you can find me on Instagram, Gospel for Enneagram. Again, that's Gospel FOR Enneagram. That's the handle. And then I'm on Twitter as well. Instagram's kind of where the party's at. That's where the most interaction's happening. And then started a YouTube channel. And again, this appeals to both faith and non-faith based people, wherever you're at. I just put out a series on relationships and 90 minutes of free teaching on every Enneagram type, about 10 minutes each. And so lots of free content on YouTube. You can go binge watch it right now on YouTube. Just search for Gospel for Enneagram. And those are some places you can reach me. But I'm hoping that some of this was helpful for people. Again, I'm in the shoes of a lot of your audience. I'm going to be transitioning from a pastor to being a full-time Enneagram author, trainer, e-course creator, all of that. Mm-hmm. I know there's a lot of people that are always wondering, when should I quit my full-time job to be a full-time author? Or how do I be a side hustle author while I'm doing this full-time job? And that's kind of where I've been at the past few years. And so I'm just trying things. Just launched my first live e-course, and then I'm going to package that as a self-paced video course. I'm going to be training church teams, training business teams, and just experimenting a lot with different sources of income, because I want to be a full-time writer. Like I just want to write all day, every day. It brings me so much life. But I know I'm going to have to do other things that I might not necessarily enjoy as much to be able to make it and make money for my family. And so I know that's a tension that a lot of your listeners probably feel as well. So I'm on a learning journey, and I'm grateful for YouTube and for podcasts and for like your podcast, because there's so much valuable content out there.
So much.
And so if you just put in the time to like every day to listen to YouTube videos, listen to podcasts like this one, like you can grow in your competency so much. And so everything I've learned and I'm doing, it's been free content on the internet.
I know.
I'm so thankful for that.
Yeah, absolutely. So last thing, just because you had mentioned it again, what would be your ideal, like where would you be 3-4 months, a year from now with YouTube specifically? Like what would that look like for you?
Yeah. the goal is to get monetized in 6 months and have that as another source of income as I'm writing. Awesome. And so it takes about 35 or so videos in order for the algorithm to pick you up. Oh, wow. And so I've got about 13 videos done right now. And nice. So maybe about 15 videos now. And so I'm just slowly just creating one video per week and putting in that work. And I know that after I get to about 35 videos, the algorithm will start picking me up and showing me to more people. But it's going to take some time. I need 4,000 watch hours and 1,000 subscribers in order to get monetized.
That's right. Yeah.
And so that's kind of just starting out right now with that. Yeah.
I've been doing the shorts. I really like YouTube shorts. But last I knew, at least, they didn't count towards watch time or anything like that. So I enjoy making them. I never liked TikTok, and YouTube shorts are kind of filling that spot for me. So
one piece of advice I heard was to stick with one social media channel and then eventually branch out, because again, we don't all have time, especially with full-time jobs, to be posting on every single, doing Instagram Reel, YouTube Short, TikTok. It's just so much. I think you've mentioned it on one of your shows about not doing TikTok because you just gotta conserve your energy.
I had to quit. It was just too much for me. So there's a host of reasons, and you're right. I did talk about it, so I won't rehash. But well, listen, it was really good, Tyler, having you on. And something tells me I'll probably be connecting with you for a round 2, a little down the road, just to kind of pick up on your progress. And I think you have so much more to offer my audience than we even tapped into in this conversation.
It's been an honor, privilege. It's been fun to chat with you, Jody.
Thank you for listening to TRBM. The theme music was provided by the ever-talented Christopher Talon. And hey, if you liked what you heard, share this show with other readers, because what's the point of telling stories if nobody's listening?